Hello everyone. In this lesson we will take a closer look at the anatomy of the circulatory system, focusing on the major blood vessels with which you should be familiar. Keep in mind that as we proceed, the podcast will not follow along with your handouts on the blood vessels, so as you continue you might consider taking notes. All of the information covered here will be included on your final exam. After making initial incisions in the body wall of the fetal pig and opening the body cavities, you're able to see many of the major organs of the pig, as is depicted here in the first figure. Of course, in this section we're interested in the structures of the circulatory system. So to begin our discussion, we'll focus first on the heart, which, as you can see, is located in the mediastinum, the middle cavity of the thorax. Each of the major blood vessels that we're interested in identifying, however, are not visible in this photo because they lie deep to other structures. For example, let's first take a look at the head and neck region. Along the midline of the fetal pig, you can see major respiratory structures including the larynx and trachea. Resting on the ventral surface of the trachea, notice a small bean-shaped organ called the thyroid gland. The thyroid is important in regulating metabolism through the production of various hormones. Lateral to the respiratory structures on either side is a large glandular structure called the thymus. The thymus, as you should recall from the immunology lab, is the site of T-cell maturation. Notice in the figure that the thymus extends caudally and partially overlies the cranial end of the heart. To properly see the blood vessels in the head and neck region, the thymus gland must be removed. When removed, you can begin to see the major vessels of the venous system. Take a moment to examine the figure. As you do so, notice that in addition to removing the thymus, the right and left lungs have also been removed, and the heart has been pulled to the pig's left side so as to better see the vessels of the thorax. Let's begin by focusing on the vessels of the neck region. Lateral to the pig's midline, on either side of the respiratory structures, are two veins, the right and left internal jugular veins. Moving outward on either side, you can also see the right and left external jugular veins. As you move down, you can begin to see a much more extensive pattern of branching in the upper limbs. Take note of the right and left cephalic veins and the right and left subclavian veins. Each subclavian vein further branches into two additional vessels, including the subscapular vein, which runs toward the pig's shoulder, and the axillary vein, which descends into the armpit region. Notice that each of the four major veins we have identified, the internal jugulars, the external jugulars, the cephalic and subclavian veins, connect at a common point, the brachiocephalic vein. Take a moment to identify the right and left brachiocephalic veins. Each brachiocephalic vein empties into a common trunk, the cranial vena cava, which delivers deoxygenated blood to the right atrium of the heart. Also visible in the thoracic cavity is the caudal vena cava, which transports deoxygenated blood from the lower extremities back to the heart. Lastly, take note of the veins branching along the thoracic cage. The internal and external thoracic vein, as well as the intercostal veins, drain blood from the area between the ribs. In the body, the veins overlie the arteries. Therefore, to view the vessels of the arterial system, the veins must be removed. In this figure, the veins have been extracted, revealing the arteries. Let's begin by focusing on the heart. Emanating from the cranial end of the heart is a large systemic vessel, the aortic arch. Take note of the ductus arteriosus. Remember that the ductus arteriosus is a small vessel that connects the pulmonary trunk to the aortic arch, allowing blood to bypass the pulmonary circuit in the fetal pig. Next, notice that radiating from the aortic arch in the fetal pig there are two major branches. The first branch is the brachiocephalic artery, and the second branch is the left subclavian artery. Remember that the structure of the aortic arch in the human body is slightly different than that of the fetal pig. In the human, there are three branches from the aorta, the third branch being the left common carotid artery. Again, however, in the pig, the vessels branch differently. Branching from the brachiocephalic artery is the right subclavian artery. Notice that, like the subclavian veins, the right and left subclavian arteries also branch into an axillary and subscapular vessel. Also branching from the brachiocephalic artery is a small vessel called the carotid trunk. From the carotid trunk, the right and left common carotid arteries branch. Again, remember the way in which the common carotid arteries branch in the fetal pig is different from the way in which they branch in the human body. Now that we have identified the major vessels of the neck and thoracic regions, let's move on and focus on the vessels of the abdominal cavity and the lower extremities. First, looking at the venous system, notice the caudal vena cava. Connecting to the caudal vena cava at the more cranial end of the figure, you can see the hepatic veins, which supply the liver. Also notice the umbilical vein. Remember, the umbilical vein carries oxygen and other nutrients from the placenta to the fetus. In addition, you can see another vein running through the liver. Okay, that vein is the hepatic portal vein. The hepatic portal system is a network of veins that divert blood from the major digestive structures to the liver so that it can be filtered to remove toxins and waste products before sending the blood back to the heart for recirculation. Next, locate the kidneys. Take a moment to identify the renal veins in the figure. The renal veins empty deoxygenated blood into the caudal vena cava. Notice that the left renal vein is about twice as long as the right renal vein. As you move caudally, you can also see the genital veins and arteries, which supply the testes in the males and the ovaries in the female. Looking at the same figure, let's now focus on the arterial system, beginning with the abdominal aorta. As you can see, there are many branches from the aorta. However, we are only going to focus on a few of the major branches, beginning with the renal arteries. Recall that in the thoracic region, the veins lie over the arteries, and the same is true here. So in the figure, while you see the left renal artery, the right renal artery is hidden as it lies dorsal to the right renal vein. Two additional important arteries seen in this figure are the umbilical arteries, which, as you should recall from the virtual pig dissection, carry deoxygenated blood and wastes away from the fetus toward the placenta. Now that you are familiar with the major arteries and veins, follow the instructions in your handout to review the material presented on the circulatory system.